Another year. Have you failed? Already? You know, that pesky New Year's resolution thing? Exactly what were you envisioning for 2024 anyway? Did you envision losing weight? You know, that's the number one resolution. Kind of hard to do when your car seems to automatically follow the path into Dunkin' Donuts. Did you envision going out and getting more exercise? Well, you know, the weather's not been just right lately. Maybe tomorrow or not. Did you envision getting up early to pray more? Well, that rascally snooze button is so handy. Oops, time to go to school. Time to go to work. Did you envision reading your Bible every day? Oops, no worries, I'll just read twice as much tomorrow, if I remember. Those begats slow you down, you know. Oh, by the way, I learned that one of our young people just finished reading the Bible all the way through. I won't mention Ashton Hicks by name because it might embarrass him, but I'm very proud of him. Oops. Took him 2 years. I tell you, I've been working on it, and I'm just now into the book of, about halfway through the book of Luke, and I've been at it for longer than 2 years. So, wow. But have you failed already? Our vision for 2024 doesn't have to fail because we fail. Our school put on a great skit last Tuesday morning at chapel on this very topic. The point being, individual failures do not mean we have to give up and start over again in 2025. What's so special about January 1 anyway? Start again on January 6th, July 17th. I can't recall, as I've read the Bible all the way through a number of times, I can't recall any verse that indicates that when we fall to sin, that we should give up on our desire to be more like Jesus. I can't find it. If you find it, let me know. I like the book of Proverbs. It seems to have a theme that runs through it. Have you noticed? Basically, whoever gives heed to instructions prospers and is considered among the wise. One day I hope to be considered among the wise. That'll probably come in heaven somewhere, I don't know. So, but I want to heed instruction. And a while back, I was reading the 4th volume of the Testimonies and came across a section entitled, Appeal to Ministers. Oh, some instruction. I'll tell you what, I read that and became very discouraged. Like, wow, I don't measure up. But there I found instructions that I wish to heed. And I made it my New Year's resolution again, because I keep failing at this. She says that every pastor, not just some of them, every pastor needs to spend several hours a day in, what do you think she said? Prayer. You're wrong. Anything else? Scriptures? No. Every pastor needs to spend several hours a day in manual labor. I'm like, whoa, I wasn't expecting that. Not just a little while, several hours a day in manual labor. Like, ain't nobody got time for that. So this is my resolution again. I want to give heed to instructions so that I may be counted among the wise. So if you see me mowing my grass, I'm doing what the Lord requires. I've made this resolution before and failed. Letting the urgent overpower the important. Isn't that why we often fail? Something comes up. And it's urgent, and it needs to be taken care of. But sometimes we forget the important. And it's not because I don't enjoy manual labor. I actually do. While living in Kenya, during breaks from school, I would do extra manual labor just because I wanted to. I wanted to work in my own yard. I wanted to cut my own grass and trim my own hedges, and I wanted to do woodworking, and so I'd drag the woodworking equipment out into the driveway and build something. One time during summer break, pastors from all over Africa came to our campus to take seminary classes. They filled the girls' dorm and the boys' dorm, and there was 100 pastors there. And I decided I'm not going to let them know who I am. I will be incognito. They will not know I'm a pastor, because if they do, there will be no end to questions, and I need a break. But I also learned there's a saying, there are no secrets in Africa. They instantly knew exactly who I was. I do not know how. It's like one time, took my family on vacation to the Kenyan coast, and we stayed at an old resort in a house with a thatched roof, and the place was kind of out of shape, but that's what we could afford. And after we got there the next morning, I wandered down to the beach, and there was an old grizzled fisherman, and he had two parrotfish. I don't know how he caught those. I've never been able to catch a parrotfish. But he had two parrotfish, and they were very beautiful, and he wanted to sell them to me for my breakfast. I said, no, thank you. But he kept the conversation going, and he, with great knowledge, wanted to share with me some interesting tidbit he had just learned. He says, are you staying at that resort? I said, yes. I have heard they have a pastor staying in house number 2. I don't know how he knew that, because I didn't even tell the people that registered us there. But he knew. I didn't tell him I was the guy staying in house number 2. No secrets there. So it happened that one day, back on campus, a delegation from the African pastors was sent to my house to bring back an answer to a burning question that they all had about me. You see, on their way to class, they had to pass by our house, and every day they saw me out there doing something, working in the yard, building something. In fact, they caught me doing this. I was out there building a skateboard. I needed new transportation to my classroom. And the students had broken my last skateboard by putting 4 people on it at the same time. And so I said, I need a new skateboard so I can get to class faster. And so I was building this skateboard when they approached my house, and they said, very respectfully, but with a hint of rebuke, we have noticed that you seem to like to work with your hands. And I knew where they were coming from. I had learned in their mindset that becoming a pastor meant that manual labor was beneath them. But I answered them, yes, I do like to work with my hands. Sister White says that in this way we become closer to God, our Creator, and that this activity would renew the body and rest and relax the mind, making it ready to do an even greater amount of work for God. She says that. And they looked at me in a stunned way and simply said, is it? Those of you that have been to Kenya know that this basically, you take this in context, but it means, we have never heard such a thing before, and we will consider this instruction. They did not send any more delegations, even though they looked at me funny for not wearing a suit at all times. Not to make a real comparison, but Jesus tried to be incognito sometimes in order to be refreshed spiritually. But delegations were often coming to question him. These were mostly made up of those who do not wish to heed his instructions, the scribes and the Pharisees. Turn with me to Matthew chapter 24. As you know, Matthew 24 is an answer to the disciples' questions about the signs of Jesus' coming. It's my hope that Matthew 24 will be completely fulfilled in 2024. I hope that happens. But that's for God to know. What I know is that I desire to live as if this is the case. Closer to Jesus than ever before and reaching as many people as possible with the good news. This is the way that the scribes and Pharisees should have been living. The question about the sign of the end from the disciples was partially in context of what happened in Matthew 23, which is actually where I'd like for you to go. You're pretty close now. Matthew chapter 23. If you have a Bible that has the words of Jesus in red, you will notice that the only verse in black is verse 1. The rest is mostly a condemnation of the lives of the scribes and Pharisees. Many of the verses start with the words, "Woe to you, scribes and Pharisees." Some people just call this the woes. Just look at a few verses with me. Verse 1. Then Jesus spoke to the multitudes and to his disciples, saying, "The scribes and Pharisees sit in Moses' seat. Therefore, whatever they tell you to observe, that observe and do. But do not do according to their works, for they say and do not do." Whoa. You know what he's saying here? Do what the preacher says, not what he does. Because he's not living up to it. Scribes and Pharisees are not living up for what they ask you to do. He continues, "For they bind heavy burdens, hard to bear, and lay them on the men's shoulders, but they themselves will not move them with one of their fingers. But all their works they do to be seen by men. They make their phylacteries broad and enlarge the borders of their garments." It's all about show. Verse 27, skip on down. "Woe to you, scribes and Pharisees, hypocrites! For you are like whitewashed tombs, and indeed appear beautiful outwardly, but inside are full of dead men's bones and all uncleanness. Even so, you also outwardly appear righteous to men, but inside you're full of hypocrisy and lawlessness." Verse 33. "Serpents, brood of vipers, how can you escape the condemnation of hell?" Wow. Evidently, Jesus knows that the time for tact is over with these leaders and their hypocrisy. Have you noticed how kindly Jesus speaks to sinners? Or at least people that admit their sins? He's not so kind in his words to those that think they're above everybody else. He calls them tombs. Nice and pretty and white on the outside, but on the inside, death, corruption. I was amazed when I saw how many tombs are on the Mount of Olives as I walked through them. It seemed that almost the whole hillside was covered in tombs. Over 150,000 of them. Full of death and corruption. White on the outside, not so nice on the inside. That'd be like biting into a Snickers bar and finding a dead mouse. Not what you were expecting. That's what Jesus is saying about them. Oh, you look delicious, but you ain't. What you see on the outside is not always proof of what is on the inside. When someone has integrity, it is integrated. All the parts and pieces of it fit together to form a whole. That makes it structurally sound. When one or more of the pieces becomes corrupted or starts to decay, the structure begins to disintegrate. Unless the corruption piece is removed or repaired, all the other pieces are eventually affected. It's like this skateboard. The wood was broken. It was unrideable. And it was only one part that was broken. But the whole thing became useless. And the same thing would happen if one of the bearings froze up. You couldn't roll. Or if a wheel fell off, you would fall off. Or if the truck became disconnected, this thing would be unusable. And that's what happens with the body. If part of it becomes corrupted, you need to get it fixed. The same could be said for the church or the family. If something's broken, they no longer fulfill their purpose as well as they should. For these things have to have full integrity. We humans that make up these organizations need to have integrity. I've noticed a lot of us divide life into departments. I do this. The home department, the school department, the work department, the church department, the friends department. It's a defense mechanism against chaos, allowing us to tackle one thing at a time without getting overwhelmed. The problem comes when we begin to have different motives and behaviors from one department to another. It's like we become different people instead of one person. We are no longer integrated. We no longer have integrity. I used to ask a question of people, and I thought it sounded very profound and deep. Tell me, how's your spiritual life? Doesn't that sound nice? No, the pastor really cares about my spiritual life. I started thinking about that question. I don't ask it anymore. The implication is not good. The question assumes that our spiritual life was separate from the rest of our activities. That's the beginning of corruption. If my spiritual life is separate from my family life, or my school life, or my social life, or my social media life, or my entertainment life, or, well, you fill in the blank. If my spiritual life is separate from any of those things, there's no integrity. But disintegrity, this is where we get the term disintegrate. Do you ever feel like your life is disintegrating? It is time to be fixed and rebuilt by the master builder. Just like that skateboard, it could not fix itself. I had to go out there and work with my hands to fix the thing. We can't fix ourselves, but we can go to the master builder and say, please put me back together. I want to be reintegrated. Look at Proverbs chapter 11. Proverbs chapter 11, verse 3. Dishonest scales are an abomination. Is that verse 3 or verse 1? It says, dishonest scales are an abomination to the Lord, but a just weight is his delight. When pride comes, then comes shame, but with the humble is wisdom. The integrity of the upright will guide them, but the perversity of the unfaithful will destroy them. If you have NIV, I like this one. It says verse 3 like this. The integrity of the upright guides them, but the unfaithful are destroyed by their duplicity. Duplicity means you're not integrated. In downtown Nairobi is the East Africa Union Conference office of our church. Also in the compounds, a small Adventist hospital, the Adventist Book Center, a guest house, a health food buffet that is delicious, a primary school, and the Nairobi Central Church. Across the street from all of this is an interesting building. It's called the Integrity Center. This building houses the Ethics and Anti-Corruption Commission headquarters for Kenya. I found it rather ironic that the building's made out of very shiny gold material. I was like, well, that kind of looks like corruption right there. But that's what they made it out of. And like many other places, including the Union office compound across the street, it's surrounded by a high fence. But unlike the Union office, the Integrity Center gate is guarded by men with AK-47s. And there is a sign beside them on the gate that says, "This is a corruption-free zone." And looking at those guns, I think they meant it. They were guarding the building. They weren't going to allow any corruption in the building. I like that sign. That sign should guard our hearts. If you ever have to get a tattoo, by the way, the Bible says not to, but if you ever have to get one, have it right here. This is a corruption-free zone. Okay? We need that sign to guard our hearts. Anything that tries to come through the gates of our lives should be evaluated to see if it brings corruption with it. I see corruption in countries and cities and churches and schools and businesses, and we wish corruption would end. But it must begin with individuals, with you and me. We need to be a personal integrity center wherever we go. At work, at home, at school, at the playground, we need to be concerned with our own integrity while not judging the integrity of others. That's hard to do. I was often visiting a hospital near Atlanta. And this particular hospital, by the way, I visited Loganville church members in 25 different hospitals in Atlanta. I'm glad we don't have that many around here. But this particular hospital I went to often, 4 parking spots for pastors. And I like to see that, not because I need a spot close to the door, but because they seem to recognize spiritual care matters. And so I'm pulling into one of these parking spots reserved for me, and on this particular day, I saw a car in the next pastor spot that made me do a double take. You see, it was a Mercedes-Benz, no problem, but this particular one looked like a problem to me. So I got out my phone and did a little research on that car and found out what that pastor paid for that car. $95,000 base price. And I suddenly became a little judgmental. I said, what kind of church pays their pastor enough to drive a $95,000 Mercedes? And then I had to ask myself, are you being self-righteous or jealous? I'm not sure what the answer was. I do know that I was being judgmental. What if someone just took the pastor's parking spot and he wasn't even a pastor at all? I didn't know that. There wasn't a sign on there that said clergy, but I didn't have a sign on my little Honda either. And if he might have judged my car like, pastor should drive something nicer than that. But so I was judging something I didn't even know about. I didn't know the backstory. And then I thought, well, he could have inherited that car from his mother when she passed away. I really started thinking about that when my mother passed away and I inherited a Cadillac. Like, wait a minute. What about the appearance of this? Hey, it was free, okay? I can use it to spread the gospel more rapidly. Yeah, I'll justify myself. Are we judging people? We're just worried about our own integrity. God knows their story. The Apostle Paul was very concerned with integrity as he spread the gospel as a missionary to the Gentiles. As you read about his journey, he often reminds people how he lived among them with integrity. He was very concerned in 2 Corinthians and that he appeared honorable both in the eyes of God and man. Even when we can fool man with our whitewash, God sees what is inside, what is in the heart. Many people who were there called it the best basketball game they had ever seen. Westwood High versus Valley Center. Have you heard of those teams? Westwood High versus Valley Center. They were rivals for years. And they were at a game to determine who would advance to the state basketball championship. From the opening whistle, the contest was a nail-biter. Players from both schools turned in the game of their lives, dribbling, passing, rebounding, shooting, and playing defense with an intensity that their fans and families had never seen before. The momentum of the game seesawed back and forth while the lead changed hands more than a dozen times. With only 10 seconds to go, Westwood scored a basket that put them ahead by a single point. Valley Center called timeout. The team huddled with their coach, who drew up what would be most certainly the final play. The plan was to work the clock down to 2 seconds, set up screens to get the best shooter to take the best shot he could do. Let him try to win the game with that last second shot. When the whistle blew, the crowd rose to its feet. The cheers were deafening. Westwood positioned its defense, and Valley Center brought the ball up. As the clock ticked down to the final seconds, the Westwood fans chanted along, 5, 4, 3, 2. The Valley Center players executed the play exactly as the coach had drawn it up. With only 2 seconds remaining, Valley Center star player took his shot. The ball bounced off the rim and ricocheted off the backboard, right to another Valley Center player who jumped up and tipped it in. The Valley Center fans went wild. Their team was going to the state finals, or so they thought. While the players and fans celebrated, the referees ran to the official scorer's table to make sure that the time on the clock had not expired when the ball was tipped in. With all of the noise, the referees had been unable to hear the buzzer to determine whether or not the shot was good. The official scorer, an older man who had held the position for many years, suddenly had the game in his hands. He hesitated for a moment, but finally leaned over the table and said, "Tell the Valley Center coach I'm very sorry, but the shot was no good. Time on the clock had expired." That news changed everything for both teams. The Westwood players and fans started celebrating their victory, while the Valley Center ones were left to deal with the agony of defeat. The stunned Valley Center coach sat on the bench with his head in his hands. The official scorer left his table, walked over and sat down on the bench beside him. With a tear in his eye, the older man embraced the distraught young coach on the bench and said, "Son, I'm so proud of you." This story, which is based on actual events, is a powerful example of the cost of living with integrity. It would have been easy for the official scorer to give the game to his son's team. Nobody would have known but him. Instead, though, he chose to preserve his integrity and did the right thing. The story is also a powerful illustration of what God did when he allowed Jesus to die on the cross. God could have thrown the game, but he took the loss of his precious son in order to preserve his integrity and to provide salvation for you and me and the rest of this world. He did the right thing. Many have wondered, why didn't God, have you ever asked this? Why didn't God just destroy Lucifer and put an end to all this misery? And the answer that we often give is, God did not want his created beings to serve him out of fear, right? While this is true, we can take it a step further. God not only had the power to destroy Lucifer, he also had the power to wipe the memory of every created being that Lucifer had ever existed. But he didn't do it. Only he would know. But God has to live with himself too. And he is a God of integrity. This would also ensure that sin would never re-enter the universe, because now we've all seen it. Do we like it? Do we like the results? I don't think so. I hope not. And that's what will keep sin from coming back into the universe, because we will still have freedom of choice in heaven, but we will have seen the destructiveness of our previous choice, and we will never choose this again. Maybe our primary resolution for this year can be more like David's. Look at Psalm 51. Psalm 51, we're going to start with verse 1. To the chief musician, a psalm of David when Nathan the prophet went to him after he had gone into Bathsheba. Have mercy on me, O God, according to your loving kindness, according to the multitude of your tender mercies. Blot out my transgressions. Wash me thoroughly from my iniquity and cleanse me from my sin. For I acknowledge my transgressions, and my sin is always before me. Against you and you only have I sinned and done this evil in your sight, that you may be found just when you speak and blameless when you judge. Behold, I was brought forth in iniquity, and in sin my mother conceived me. Behold, you desire truth in the inward parts, and in the hidden part you will make me know wisdom. Purge me with hyssop, and I shall be clean. Wash me, and I shall be whiter than snow. Make me hear joy and gladness, that the bones you have broken may rejoice. Hide your face from my sins, and blot out all my iniquities. Create in me a clean heart, O God, and renew a steadfast spirit within me. I think I pray that more than anything else, because I know what's in my heart, and it's not good. Hold your finger there. I pastored a church one time that loved to torture pastors. And their board meetings would last 4, 5, 6 hours. And it was not pleasant. And I'd be driving to board meeting. We'd have it Sunday morning. And I'd drive to board meeting, and I would be thinking evil thoughts. And I would be thinking thoughts like, you know what? When Sister so-and-so says this, and I know she's going to say it, I got the perfect response that'll nail her. You just try it. These are what's going on. And then Sister so-and-so will say this. I know exactly what she's going to say, and I'm going to nail her too. That's my thoughts. There was a little place you could pull off the road halfway to the church from my house. And before every board meeting, I pulled off in that little spot. Create in me a clean heart. Renew a right spirit in me. And I'd get to board meeting, and Sister so-and-so would say exactly what I knew she would say, and I said something totally different than I had planned. And Sister so-and-so would rebuke the same thing. I'd say something totally different than I planned. That's the power of that prayer. It can even change my heart. It's like, wow. So he continues, create in me a clean heart, O God, and renew a steadfast spirit within me. Do not cast me away from your presence, and do not take your Holy Spirit from me. Restore to me the joy of your salvation, and uphold me by your generous spirit. Then I will teach transgressors your way, and sinners shall be converted to you. What a New Year's resolution. When this happens in our lives, what we envision for 2024 might be changed, might be enhanced, might be improved. The other things that we have resolved will then become based on love for God rather than the desire to make myself better. I think that works better. I will still long for the Lord to come, but not so much for my sake, but for his sake. Not so much to get me away from my troubles. Wouldn't you like to get away from things like paying taxes and all this and whatever is going on in work and school? Wouldn't you just love to get away with it? Lord, come quickly. Wow, how selfish can we be? And rather than take me away from my troubles, maybe I want him to come so that his name is glorified. Not so much to stop my sorrows, but to stop his sorrows as he watches what goes on here. When we look to the future with integrity, what we envision will stop being self-centered and will start being God-centered. Proverbs 4 says this, let your eyes look straight ahead, and your eyelids look right before you. Ponder the path of your feet, and let all your ways be established. Do not turn from the right or the left. For 2024, may our vision be focused straight on ahead to Jesus.